Hi, welcome to StoryMakers. I'm Rocco Staino, and today we have Sergio Ruzzier with us, and he's a creator of over 20 children's books, his latest being A Letter for Leo. And we have something in common. We're both Brooklyn boys, aren't we?
Kind of, yeah. Kind of.
I know that you didn't start out in Brooklyn. So where did you start out?
I was born in Milan, in Italy, and then I moved to Brooklyn in '95.
Ah, well, that actually does make you a Brooklyn sort of
19
native.
years.
Right.
Yeah.
So why children's books?
Well, when I was a kid, I was not a very good reader. And the only books that I really liked were books with lots of pictures, including comic books and comic strips and picture books. For example, one of my very favorite books when I was a kid was the Little Bear series of, illustrated by Maurice Sendak. And anyway, books with pictures were always my favorite.
So as a child, were you attracted to drawing?
I like to draw with, like probably most kids. I was not one of those talented kids who would always draw, always with a pencil in their hand. You know. But one episode that I always like to remember is I think it was in 4th grade or something, and we had to do to write an essay or something. And I asked my teacher, "Can I do a comic strip instead, a comic book instead?" And she said, "Yes, sure." And I did this story. And so I think that was the first time that I saw that I could be taken seriously doing. Drawing and telling stories with my drawings instead of writing, and that was a nice thing that happened.
Now, did you go to school to become an illustrator?
No, I did. I never liked schools in general, and I didn't go to art school. I don't know, a lot of people have positive experiences, so I'm not saying that art schools are bad, but they were not for me.
So you're self-taught?
Yes, you can say that. I was a big fan of American comic strips. For example, Seeger's Popeye and Charles Schulz and Crazy Cat, all those things that I could find in magazines in Italy at the time, translated. And that, together with Italian art that I would see, frescoes in churches or in museums. And so those two things were my two teachers.
You enjoy drawing animals because you've drawn mice and elephants and ducks, okay. And now in this book, you did the illustrations and the story. So tell us a little bit about the story. No spoilers.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's a story of this mailman, actually male weasel, because he's a weasel kind of, who's lives in a little town. He has many friends. He delivers letters, packages to everybody. But he's a little sad because he never gets a letter himself. So he really longs to receive his first letter that he never received. And then one day he receives something else. He finds something else, and that will change his life, hopefully for the better.
Yes. Why always animals?
We don't know the anatomy of animals as well as we know the anatomy of people, so we don't see the mistakes as much. No, this is kind of a joke, but maybe not completely.
Tell us about creating the drawings for A Letter for Leo.
Well, as most of my books, the illustrations are in pen and ink and watercolor. So what I do is I do the layout for the book, I do the thumbnail sketches for all the pages, and then I start working on each individual drawing, and I start with a preparatory drawing just in pencil on regular paper, and then I study the composition. Sometimes I use Photoshop to create the composition, and then once I'm done with that, I use that final pencil drawing to trace it onto the watercolor paper using a light box.
And you brought some of your drawings here to show us.
Yes.
So show us a few of them.
I can start with probably my favorite of them.
This is your favorite?
I think so. I'm fond of it also because I was working on this as a sample when I was shopping the book around. You always want to have one finished drawing to show the editors when you're presenting the project. And this I did while I was at the Maurice Sendak Fellowship in 2011. And so I had a lot of time and ease to work on this, and so that's why I'm I'm particularly fond of this.
You mentioned the Sendak Fellowship. So tell us about that.
Sendak started the year before I was called, so in 2010, and inviting, at the time was 4 illustrators or artists of different kinds to spend a month in Ridgefield, where he lived, and he had a house close to his house with 4 beautiful spacious rooms that we used to live and work for a month. I was there with Ali Bahrampour and Francis Preston Gannon and Denise Saldutti Igilski. And we had a great time, and we were able to see Maurice every day, and I cooked for him, I made jonki for him and other things, and we would walk in the woods with his dog Herman and him and chat, and it was really a wonderful time.
So did he give you any advice?
He did. He was very cautious not to overwhelm us or not to scare us. He was very concerned about that. I remember him telling me something about my noses. I don't know, maybe he didn't like the noses that I drew. It was
Were they too Italian, do you think?
He was, in that period, he was obsessed with noses for different reasons. But I remember him telling me, but why do you do always these noses that point out? And I didn't even realize that. But then the day after, he told me, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have told you that. It was so stupid of me to say that. I'll say, no, it's great, I don't mind.
And you know, we have a kitchen here at the KidLit TV studio, so we're going to have you back so you can make gnocchi for all of us. You know. So you have another drawing to show us from the book.
Yeah, I have a bunch. This is one of the deliveries that Leo does, and he's taking a box of, I don't know exactly what it is.
Well, he can't open it because that's invasion of privacy, I'm sure. But we could all guess.
It would be so tempting, though. If you were a mailman, wouldn't you open all packages to see what's
That's
in?
right.
Not to steal them.
No, but these security cameras all over. I don't know if I do it. In your books, secondary to the story, are a slew of objects, very interesting objects. In Letter for Leo, there's this, what I would say is an antique chest. Now, how do you research these?
Yes, it's actually a big pleasure of mine to look for the right objects, for the things that I would want to own and place them in my illustrations. And sometimes there are objects that I maybe have or that I find in books, but more recently I've been using eBay a lot. On eBay, the sellers put up an item and including a lot of pictures from different angles and details to show maybe a flaw or something. And so I use eBay a lot. It's easy to search, and I get a lot of ideas from that.
So I understand there is a hidden homage to Sendak in this book.
Yes.
And we're going to send out a challenge to all our viewers. The challenge is, if you find what you think is the homage to Sendak, if you tweet it to Sergio, and your Twitter is?
Sergio Ruzzier.
Right, and use the hashtag Sendak Homage, which is HOMAGE. And if they get it right, we're going to enter you into a drawing for a limited edition print of the cover.
Yes.
Signed by you. Yes, and I'm fortunate to have one of those, and it's already framed.
And you didn't find the thing.
And I didn't even have to find it. Yes, but thank you for that.
It's tiny. You really have to look for it. The homage is.
Yes, and so that's the challenge to all of you. But you have some other books coming out.
Yeah, the next one that was written by Yves Bunting is called Whose Shoe? And this is the FNG, so it's the book before it's bound. And it's a story of a little mouse who finds a shoe and looks for the owner of the shoe.
You've done other books with Yves Bunting.
This is my third with her. In 2013, we had Have You Seen My New Blue Socks? Mm-hmm. About a duck who's looking for his socks. And before that, I did Tweak Tweak. That Yves wrote. It was about a little elephant who was walking around the country with her mother.
Is it easier to illustrate a book that was written by someone else, or is it easier to illustrate a book that you write?
Easier. I think it's easier to illustrate somebody else's book. It's a very different process. The way you start working on a book when somebody else wrote it, it's quite basic. You get the manuscript and you read it, you decide the layout, which sentence will go on which page, on which spread, and you start to lay out like that. But the good thing about illustrating somebody else's text is that you can be a little mischievous. You can misinterpret the text, pretending to misunderstand, so that you can add a lot of your own. When you illustrate your own stories, it's as if the author is behind your shoulder and tells you, this is not what I meant. And so I like both. It's a very different experience, and I wish I want to go on doing both.
You have another book too, right? Coming out?
Another book that I wrote, also published by Clarion. It's coming out in the fall of 15, and it's called Two Mice, and it's a counting book up to 3. You don't want to overdo it.
So we have to find out who the third creature is, I guess.
There are different creatures. There are eggs, there are starfish, there are hopefully a lot of interesting things. It's an adventure, but based on the numbers 1 to 3. And this is the dummy of the book. So this is what I show the publisher, and this is a printout, black and white printout of the cover, Two Mice.
You have an interesting work environment in Brooklyn. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I share a studio in Gowanus in Brooklyn with 4 other authors, illustrators, Sophie Blackhall, Brian Floca, and Eddie Hemingway, and Johnny Bemelmans-Marciano.
Was John Rocco part of that group?
John Rocco was one of the original 5, and then Eddie, when he moved to California, Eddie Hemingway came and took his place.
So working with all these fellow illustrators, I guess it kind of breaks down the solitary life of an illustrator.
Sure. Actually, before starting the studio together, I always worked by myself, either in a room of my home or renting a room somewhere else. And I actually didn't think that I could manage to work with other people there. I was afraid that I would get distracted and I wouldn't get anything done. It's actually the other way around. When you're in a space like that, and you still have your private, corner in that room, so you can isolate yourself if you want to. It's actually much better. You see other people work, you see what they're creating, and there is a good feeling in the air when you. So it actually helps, and it helps me waste less time on the internet or doing things that
shopping online or anything like that. I think KidLit TV needs to come and visit the studio. It sounds like a fun place.
We have to clean up the studio first, but sure.
Besides spending all your time in that studio, you do go out on the road. Do you do school visits and conferences and things like that?
Yeah, both. Yeah, it's a very important part of my occupation. I think to get to meet the people, the readers of my books, and it's always a great experience. I usually prefer when I visit a school and I'm in a classroom, not in the big auditoriums. I do that too, and it's fine, but it's a different experience. I'm particularly showing something on the screen and talking. But when you're in the class, you can really talk to the kids one-on-one and draw with them, and I really like to do that. Yes.
My author illustrator friends, they all have little unusual stories. So what's your unusual school story?
Well, there is always something that happens that is either cute or funny or strange. But one thing that I can tell you is once I was signing books for the kids after the visit, and so this little boy opened his copy of the book for me to sign, and I asked him, "Do you want a little drawing as well?" And he went like, "Just sign." I didn't want to waste his time. Right?
Well, part of the process of being in publishing for authors and illustrators is having an agent. So who's your agent?
I just started recently with Jennifer Laughran.
Oh, yeah, I know Jennifer. She's up in the Hudson Valley, and she actually works part-time at Oblong Books.
She does.
And well, you're going to have to...
I haven't visited yet, but I would like to go up there.
She's a big person on social media.
She has a lot of followers on Twitter. She's very good and funny and always ready to give answers that are interesting and amusing at the same time. So, yes.
If there was one thing you can change about book publishing, what would that be?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I'd like the community, generally speaking, to be a little bit more open to open endings in books and things that are not very clear, that are not overly explained. I feel the pressure often to explain everything in my stories. If there is something unresolved, it's usually seen as a problem, and I don't think that's always true. And a little bit of mystery is good to have, right? So that you can think of other stories on your own.
Well, thanks for being with us today. And a letter for Leo, and the next one in 2015 is?
Wool's Shoe, written by Bunting, and then Two Mice, that is a book that I also wrote.
Well, thanks again. It was a lot of fun. Remember, until next time, give a kid a book in any format.